Hello, welcome to Wind Down Wednesday. This is our weekly real estate update, Atlanta real estate, and I've got some similar players and a new guest today. Again, my name is Katie Shank. I'm with Keller Williams Realty, Atlanta Midtown. And I've got my business partner and buyer's agent here, Robby King. And then we have our magnificent lender with Ameris Bank, Jonathan Minsk. And then today's special guest is another magnificent person. Amy Yarkoni is with Amy Yarkoni Law, right? Is the name of your company, right? And she is here to talk about her business, and she's an estate attorney in Atlanta. So she'll tell us some interesting things about her business and how it relates to real estate as well. So like usual, we just like to go through our stats for the week, tell you some updates about what's happening in Atlanta real estate that Robby will go over, and then we'll talk with Jonathan for an update, and also Amy will tell us about her business. But if anybody has any questions or anything during this whole thing, feel free to write them in the chat box or on Facebook Live. You can do it in the comments, and we're here to answer your questions anytime. So I will turn it over to Robby, and he can talk about what happened this last week in real estate.
Thank you. So yeah, what's happening in Atlanta? So the last 7 days was pretty good. So we've had one little change that I thought was interesting, and I think it's only because sometimes contracts will close and sales will close and people will take some extra time getting the system updated. So last week, you know, the months of available inventory only changes once every month, you know, like the first of the month. And so last time when we talked about it, I think it was 4.0. It was interesting to see apparently some other contracts were recorded in FMLS. And so so months of available inventory went down to 3.9. So I thought that was interesting. Hopefully we've got everything from the last month recorded in FMLS, and so we know the true measurement of that stat. But so the average sales price inside the perimeter in the last week was just a little over 434,000, with a median days on the market of 12.5. So that's quite something. Only 12 and a half days between listing and going binding under a contract that closed. The median sales to list price ratio, 99.38%. So what I've been noticing is that, and what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, is I think that spring definitely did kind of get pushed back maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and now the spring market is happening now. We're not skipping it altogether. It just moved a little bit. It shifted a little bit. But things are starting to get very busy, and lots of properties are going up against a multiple offer scenario. So that kind of explains why things are, you know, if they're priced correctly and if it's a marketable property, they're only 12 and a half days on the market and getting 99% of asking price. That's really, really remarkable. So as far as listings go, 437 new listings were put on the market. 4 listed as coming soon, so those should be active in a couple of weeks. Another 106 contracts went pending last week. 88 closed sales, and of those, so including that 437 new listings, 4,399 active listings on the market inside the perimeter. And that includes single family and attached homes, new construction, that's everything. So those are our stats for the week.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I think that's great to see the consistency of most of these numbers, especially over the last, I'd say month, really. The last month has really picked up and really been consistent in those numbers. And, you know, we posted some stuff this week that said basically summer is the new spring, and it is, because summer is already here because it's 85 degrees outside. And, you know, spring is gone, and now people are literally coming out. There's a lot more activity going on. So those are great to hear, and the consistency again. So with the hand in that is Jonathan and the type of activity he has on loans, and so many people are buying and getting mortgages right now. So I'd love to hear his update and see how they compare to our update.
Thanks, Katie. So just to give some just overall statistics, in the month of May, Ameris closed $1 billion in mortgages, which is our best month ever. And the last update that I received for June, it looks like we're going to close right around 950 million. So almost the same as May, which is 2 amazing months. I think in May it was about 23 or 2,400 units. Now, a lot of those, take in mind, were refinances, but those are still transactions. So that's a lot of business. And I'm personally starting to see that more people are reaching out to get pre-qualified. I think, people are starting to become more comfortable with getting out of the house a little bit more than they have in the past. And I think, a lot of people are starting to go back into the office, at least part-time. And I think just getting out, I can just see that the roads are busier now. I can see that the parking lot in my building is fuller than it has been in months. And interest rates right now for a 30-year fix is 3%. So, rates are fluctuating anywhere from 3 to 3.25. Historically low numbers. It's just incredible. And the thought is that rates will probably stay somewhere in the low 3s, at least through the election. And then at that point, who knows? Really, they have nowhere to go but up. So the question is just going to be, when that's going to start to happen. So, people, people want to take advantage of these, 3% interest rates. And so now is the time to get out there and get a jump start on finding that house and getting closed. So like I said, we're doing business as usual. We're closing purchase transactions in 30 days or less. No hiccups. One thing I do want to mention that we've been talking about week after week, and that there are alternative ways to close a transaction, and real estate attorneys are offering, being able to do it virtually through a Zoom call. Mm-hmm. And the state has mandated that, that is acceptable through June 12th. And as of right now, we don't know if that's going to be extended or whether that's just the end all date. And then things go back to, face-to-face or mail-aways or power of attorney. So we'll have to wait and see what the latest and greatest is on that. And maybe next week I'll have an update on that. So for me, that's it.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks for bringing up that point about the 12th coming up, because that's in a couple of days, right? Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, like you say, if that is extended or not. We had a closing attorney on last week on our call, Harold Minsk, and he mentioned it, I think, as well. And he also just said that a lot of people haven't taken advantage of that. A lot of attorneys have done things where they set up shop outside. They've had little tents where people close. They've come to your car and close. There's a lot of things that they can continue to do that. There's no rules around that. But with the Zoom thing, it's interesting to know what will happen.
Yeah, and just real quick to say, to chime in on that, as far as I know with my clientele, I've only people actually close via Zoom. So it has not been by far the most popular way to close. When people are popular. Yeah, when people understand exactly what's involved in that. You have to have a package in front of you, and a package can be 100+ pages. And so it's either got to be couriered to them, or they have to, have access to a printer to print it out. And just time people realize all that's involved, and you got to courier it back and all that kind of stuff like that. Finding it is just probably just as easier to go in and just do it, with social distancing. So I don't think it's going to have an impact either way, whether it is or is not extended, but that option is available through the 12th, and we'll see, if it's continued thereafter.
Yeah, that's good to point out. One question I was going to ask you about just the types of mortgages and things. I know at one point, kind of earlier on, there were some restrictions regarding jumbo loans, and I wondered if you had any real changes on that in the last month or so, or any other programs. Have you seen changes, FHA or VA or anything like that? No
real recent changes. The changes that were made in the beginning of this epidemic, and they still are in place. At some point, I would guess that they will probably be reversed. But it used to be prior to this that the jumbo rates were really neck and neck with the conforming rates. And a pretty big gap between the two. And because a lot of the jumbo investors have pulled out of the market temporarily, so there's less there's less, you know, for lenders to sell. There's less options of where they can sell those loans in the secondary market. And so, the rates on those loans have gone up probably about a half or 5/8 of a point. So that, like I said, you know, if we're locking in loans at, you know, 3% on a conforming loan amount, jumbo loan could be, you know, 3.75 on a 30. So that's a pretty big difference where, like I said, prior to this, I mean, there was maybe 1/8% of the difference, but not 3/4 of a point.
Yeah. And remind people what is considered a jumbo loan.
Anything over 510 400 is considered jumbo.
Okay. Cool. That's good. Because I think that's crucial. And again, in Atlanta, you know, we don't always go over average sales price in our stats, but you know, our average sales price as a team, or even in general in the areas we work, is, you know, inching from between 400,000 and 500,000. So it's not unusual for people to have jumbo loans because so many of the homes are over 500, 600,000,
Right.
you know, and those aren't even, you know, any kind of McMansion or anything like that. You know, I mean, these are like
a luxury property.
It's not a luxury property in Atlanta. It can be a really, really nice condo. It can be a really well done renovation or newer home maybe in town. But, you know, most of our clients are in that range that they're inching up to the jumbo loan, you know, so it's a good thing to know about. So cool. Well, thank you, Jonathan. We may have questions for you later. Okay. So now we get to our special guest, Amy. So Amy, thank you for coming, joining us. And please tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we may have some questions for you as well.
Sure. So I'm Amy Yarkoni with Amy Yarkoni Law, and I'm an estate planning attorney. So I do fiduciary work, anything that's really in the probate court. So wills, trusts, estates, and we do incapacity planning. So healthcare directives and guardianships, conservatorships. We provide fiduciary services, so we'll act as a trustee. And our office does special needs trusts. We do land trusts, which kind of circles into your real estate area. We do set up entity formations for LLCs. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, and help people put their property in an asset protected way and hold it. And we do put a lot of properties for individuals, particularly single individuals, widowed individuals, of where their primary residence, they have equity in it, they may need that. We'll put that in trust for them. It helps them alleviate the probate process, and it allows them to appoint somebody as a trustee behind them if they need help. So everything in that area is what we do. So we talk to people all day long about what their legacy is going to be. Sometimes that is the family home. It's often something that people work very hard throughout their lives to buy that house and get that mortgage and then pay that home off. And they want to make sure their kids get it when they're gone. So we'll talk about that. But we create all the documents from kind of nuts to bolts, from if you become sick, if you need help with your finances, and through the process of you passing. And then if your family wants our help, we'll help them with the administration of the estate. That's the short version of what we do. So.
That's the short version? That's a lot. And you can't do it all by yourself. You have a few people helping you, right?
I do have a few people helping me, thank goodness. So
good.
I hear one of them outside my door. So
yeah. She's still in the office, people. We're over here drinking wine. She doesn't have any. Well, good. Well, this is great. So you mentioned a couple of things that I think that relate to real estate, and other people may have questions about this, but one thing that was interesting to me was you talked about the land trust. You know, I was curious how is that incorporated with just in people's individuals' homes and the land they own, or does that get into commercial, or how does that work?
Well, so sometimes people just want to buy a piece of property, but they don't want their name on it. And so oftentimes there are title companies or other attorneys' offices we might work with. We'll have a client who is an entrepreneur that has a closely held business. They'll sell it, they'll make some money on it, and then they'll not necessarily want to be as easily found or accessible. And so they want some privacy back after those transactions happened, and they'll establish a land trust. We'll coordinate with another counsel's office and a title company. They'll set up a trust, they'll fund it, and they'll typically hold that trust in an LLC. And then the trustee is the other attorney. Okay. And so the name purchasing the property, again, it's fully funded, so there's capital in it. So the name purchasing it is the attorney. So when you go from the old owner of the property to the new owner, you go from the old owner to an attorney acting as a trustee. And then that trust is a beneficiary under an LLC, which has also typically got a different registered agent, and the incorporated party is also an attorney. So it's your private home and you live in it and you own it, you bought it all outright. You're holding it in an LLC inside of that trust, but your name's not on it. So as you're going through the chain of title, you have that privacy. People aren't looking it up in the record and seeing you. They'd have to get to those core documents, and they'd have to have a reason to get to them through counsel to actually figure out who the beneficiaries were.
Okay. That makes sense. And I mean, Robby and I can speak to for sure. A lot of times we're looking at listings online and we're seeing those LLCs and various, you don't know who the homeowner is, right? And I think a lot of times it can be investors that own, quite a bit of properties, or it can be situations like you say, they want to be, private about it for some reason, even if it's their personal property versus having multiple investment properties. Cool. Yeah,
Amy, I have two questions actually for Amy. One is in regards to the land trust. So let's just say that an individual has protected their asset just as you described, and let's just say that particular individual gets sued for whatever reason.
Correct.
Protected against a lawsuit. So if a lawsuit is filed and is in favor of the person who brings the lawsuit forward and wins, can that property be, I guess liquidated or forced to sell in that case if it's protected under the land trust agreement?
So the primary protection, the land trust would keep it private, and it would enable that third party to act as the trustee and set the beneficiaries up, or the owner of the share of the trust up as the LLC members. And so the limited liability company would provide some protection, but again, it would depend on, I hate to say that as a lawyer, but it depends. So in the facts of your case, if the lawsuit was pertaining to that property, so let's assume that the landowner got sued for an incident that occurred on the property that was held in the trust and kept by the limited liability company, it would of course be exposed because it's the property itself. And so through disclosure, they would find the owner, they would run it through, and presumably there would be insurance on the property because it would be properly capital funded. It would be owned by that. It'd have the equity stake of the value of the home, and it would have insurance on it. So to the extent the suit exceeded, or there was some reason why the insurance wouldn't cover, there was some negligence or some willful conduct or something that caused the injury, then if it was related to the property, it's probably exposed. If it's your home, you put your $1 million home on Savannah's waterway into a trust and held it in an LLC, and it's your vacation home, and you got sued for something else that you did. Let's assume that you own that and the beneficiaries of that LLC are actually you and your spouse and your children, for example. There are interests outside of your own, and you got sued, and that had been properly maintained. It had been paid for via the trust and the LLC. The taxes and the insurance were upkept under the LLC. LLCs, like all entities, require you to keep a form of a corporate book. So you've got your company book that has your annual meeting minutes. As long as you've managed it, you filed taxes on it, you've taken care of it, and treated the entity like its own entity with all of the requirements, then you get the protection of the limited liability company. And so that's why people do that. That's why people set those up. But a lot of people miss the little details in managing the entities.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't know any of that. And then my second question is completely different. So let's just say that somebody purchases a house, one individual, or just say two people that buy a house together, right? And let's just say it's a husband and wife, for example, and they title it with joint tenancy, right of survivorship. Obviously, if one person passes, then the house reverts immediately to the other person. But what in the instance if, let's just say it was one individual, or maybe two individuals that bought it, but they didn't have a joint tenancy titleship. Person dies. What is the exposure that the other homeowner is subject to?
Yeah, it's a tough one when that happens. So it's two questions. So on the first one with regard to the right of survivorship deed, when we have a joint tenants deed or a joint tenant with right of survivorship, unless it says joint tenants in common, we typically consider it a right of survivorship deed. And so what we would do for the survivor in that instance, although the operation of law did pass the property, just to make sure they have clear title and they don't run into any issues later when they come to you for a refinance or a mortgage, we try as soon as we can after the death to go ahead and file an affidavit, a copy of the death certificate, and a muniment of title, so that that's actually re-recorded and it shows clear title vested in that survivor, because the record itself doesn't know the person died if we don't do that. You can prove it later when you go to do these things, but that's often, it's just not something you want to find later. We have all the paperwork, it's just happened, we just want to clear it up. The second scenario is, and it could be a husband and wife who meant to take their property or think that they own it as right of survivorship, and this happens more frequently than I wish it did, and one of them passes away, but the deed says Randy and Barry, they own this property. And the and, without the joint tenant language, without that, means that they each own 50% of the home. So now we have to open a probate estate. And let's just assume that they had 2 minor children when one died. Now we have to get a guardian ad litem appointed. And now that surviving parent owns their home that they pay for, they own their half. And if they had 2 children, they own a third of the other half, assuming there aren't any debtors or creditors that come in and take part of it. And then they have a guardian ad litem who holds the other interest of that deceased spouse half for the benefit of those minor children. Suppose they want to refinance later. They have to go back to the court to do that. So when we have deeds that are 2 people purchasing it and they have a tenant in interest where they want a tenant in common holding. So if I die, I want my half of this property to go to my family. We typically recommend that as people go into those transactions that they knowingly decide to give either a first right of refusal for purchase to the other owner, that they set up some form of distance in time from a death, that that person can stay in the home, some form of a life estate, so that all of a sudden you don't lose your partner in your either business investment or your partner in your property, and now you potentially lose your home, or you're in a probate fight with the person who should inherit it under the law. Those cases can be really tough when there's no will. So yeah, it's tenants in common is a tough one when someone dies unexpectedly without planning.
Yeah. Thank you. Excellent answer.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you said like it's in the detail, I mean, there's so many details to that. So, we don't have a closing attorney on today, but we've had them on several times. And this is actually something I think we could bring up another time, and Jonathan probably could speak to it best. But, when a couple, whether they're married, partners, whatever they are buying a home, like they really do need, at that time, they've got to really pay attention how they're taking title. Because is any of that automatic on the loan end, Jonathan? Like if they're both on the loan, then they're both on the title. But
yeah, so there's a drop down box and that will say how they want it titled, but the ultimate decision would be the closing attorney will verify with the purchasers how they want the title to read, whether it's joint tenancy with right of survivorship, et cetera. And most married couples or couples that are buying it, together to live in it together will opt to have it titled in that way. I always recommend it. If anybody ever asks me, I always recommend that, always. And I always do that as the default as well. In situations so that, that I've done what I feel like I can do to protect them.
We get inquiries from clients frequently when a parent is making a gift to a child who's recently been married and they want to make a gift for a down payment on a home. But this is a new marriage to them, and it's generally a younger generation, possibly a first marriage. And so they'll ask us about recommendations for the title. And if we make this gift, we have the couple getting the gift, but they really want the deed to be in their son or daughter's name in case something goes wrong, because all the equity is basically theirs from the down payment. And so we'll discuss with them what happens when you make the gift, and then you title the property in joint right of survivorship, you've commingled the gift. So if they were to get divorced tomorrow, they split the equity in that house, generally speaking. So sometimes those things come up and people will ask us in advance. Sometimes they ask us after you're at the table trying to figure out what we're doing with.
A little too late. Yeah, that's a good point. I love that. And we work with many clients who do that. We've definitely had a couple sales this year, I think, where parents have been involved in giving gifts. That's common with first-time home buyers. It's also common. First time, it's very common, and possibly young couple, even a couple who's older that just got married or something. So that's really good to think about, because these are things that, we're not the experts in, but you guys are. And that's why we direct, people to talk to you guys prior to making these big decisions sometimes, because they really don't understand it. Even people who bought homes and have owned them for years don't understand that. Like you said, unfortunately, if somebody were to pass away, a partner, and you didn't realize how your home is titled, that's a big surprise, So obviously a will is crucial. I think a trust, all the things that you do, I think are so important to have in place, whether you're single or, married, have a partner and a family. And that was something else you mentioned, the difference between LLC and trust. I wonder if you wanted to talk about that for a minute and why you recommend that. You said sometimes to people that may be widowed or single, and how it protects them.
So oftentimes when we do a lot of revocable trusts, which is similar to what we've set up with you, where you have a piece of property, it's your property, but you're widowed or you're, a young professional and you own your own property, but people are paying off their homes. They are building equity in their home. And it's often, sometimes at least, the most cash efficient way to get money as a resource. So if you have a home and a power of attorney that allows somebody to manage it or sell it if you're incapacitated, we often end up having to go back to the probate court and getting a conservatorship established in certain instances. So let's just assume the worst happened. You had an incapacity, you were at Shepherd Center for a year or two, but your home is a split level or has multiple stairs, and you're not coming home to that home. And so the person who's managing your affairs actually needed money to help pay for your specialized care above and beyond what you had for medical. And you had a 401k, and you had, some traditional investments that maybe the market was doing what it was doing in March. And then you had $200,000 worth of equity in your home. They wanted to refinance your home and pull the equity out because, as Jonathan mentioned, the rates are really low. And so they wanted to get that cash flow. If it's in your trust and you're incapacitated, your trustee would not have to go to court, would not have to do anything else. As long as they have those powers under the document, while you were incapacitated, they could refinance your home. They could get those things taken care of. And rather than incur income tax liability for pulling money that was needed to care for you out of a 401k or a deferred tax investment or an investment that happened to be doing poorly at that moment, they'd have access to that home. Plus, if they needed to rent it, if you weren't going to be able to come back to it, or they needed to maintain it, they could instantly do that in the terms of the trust and get access to it without having to go through the court, without having questions about the power of attorney. So for older, single, widowed individuals that own property in Georgia, it can help us bypass probate. We don't have to go to probate if the property is held properly in the trust. And if you become incapacitated and you're a single individual where that holds a significant amount of your liquid, it could be liquid, could be refinanced and extracted, where you didn't have those income tax hits, we will look at it from that perspective too. So there's a few reasons why we would want to put property in trust.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really helpful because, again, I didn't really know much about that until I researched it personally, and Amy told me more, and I thought it was really smart. And I've since told other people about it. I think they've taken advantage of that as single people and even as couples in various family situations. So cool. Did anybody else have any other questions? I was going to try to peek at my Facebook and see if there were any there. But Jonathan or Robby have any questions for Amy, or does Amy have any questions for us? We can answer any questions.
So I do have a couple of questions. So Jonathan, we have a number of folks that come in where they have multiple properties and they've accumulated them over the years, and we are looking at suggesting to them stripping equity out of them or taking a look at rebalancing to where they have investments and real estate. And so with the rates as low as they are, because these are rental properties, I'm assuming the rates might be a little higher.
They are, yes.
And per portfolio, if you all make any recommendations on this, if you, let's say we had somebody who maybe owned 5 or 6 homes here in the Atlanta area, they're all free and clear. They've had them anywhere from 15 to 30 years. And so they've been fully depreciated. They're in either a trust, an LLC, or their individual name, because we have all, and they want to restructure and take some of that equity back out. What would be the percentage that they could take on average, and what would those rates look like? Do you do?
So you're looking at a cash out refi on investment property is, I believe, a 75% max LTV. And you're looking probably 30-year fixed rate. There's a big hit for investment property. It's about 3 discount points. So you're probably looking at a rate of probably mid-4s.
Okay.
On a 30-year fixed. But still, I mean, if they even if they take 50% out, a 4% or 4.5% interest rate, and then they've got that liquidity where they can take that money in and invest elsewhere and diversify. I mean, I think it's a great strategy, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of people are doing that now too, and I'm seeing a lot of people not only refinance from 30 to 30, but they're going from 30 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are able to, get, knock 10 years off their loan and even still get their payment lower than what it was before, depending on where their rate was, before they refinanced. So a lot of people are doing that because obviously if you have a shorter term, then you're paying more towards your principal balance every month and therefore accumulating equity at a much faster rate.
Sure. Okay. Good to know.
That's great. And even at that rate of 4 or 4.5 that's still so low, right? I mean, depending on.
That's terrible.
Comparing
My first
it.
mortgage was 11 and
Yeah.
11,682.5 or something. It was.
Isn't that wild?
Really high.
That wasn't that long ago. We're very young. So.
Yeah. I actually did a proposal for somebody, I think it was yesterday, wants to refinance his investment property and to refinance it, and he wants to pull out $50,000 in it. To do some more investing in the market, and his payment was going down. He was doing another 30 to 30, but he was pulling out $50,000 and having his payment go down. So that was kind of a winner,
Wow.
And with you asked Jonathan specifically, obviously they may have a strategy with refi and doing that with having so many properties. I've worked with people in the past and in previous kind of shifts and recessions where they've decided to sell sometimes one or the other, either the most desirable of their homes or the least desirable, and just kind of like pull it in if it's a lot to manage, so we obviously can help in that respect, that it doesn't cost anything for them to just get what's considered a CMA, comparative market analysis, to tell them what the home is worth and what they could sell it for today if they were curious. Because one thing that's happening right now that we've talked on all these calls with, and with the numbers reflected, is that the inventory is so low. So almost wherever these houses are, they probably are at a place where somebody wants to buy a house, and there's just not a lot out there. So if there was ever a great time to sell, ironically also a great time to buy, is now is still a seller's market. And there's just a lot of people looking, right now for things that they can't find. So that's just a side note if they wanted to just get rid of one of them and refi the rest. But
and here's another note too, that's something that's interesting in the market right now is because of, there's of the forbearance laws that are in place and, what lenders are doing to help people stay in their homes. There's a lot fewer foreclosures right now than there normally are. So, and people that buy investment properties and then renovate them and flip them are having a hard time finding properties to buy and flip.
Yeah, they're mailing me letters every day.
Yeah.
I'm getting a faux handwritten letter every day saying, can we have this property from your decedent? Can we see your name on the publication? And
I'm sure you do get those. Yeah,
we do. We get a fair number of those. So. And we get referrals. So you said you had a closing attorney on here. So we get referrals from closing attorneys sometimes because someone will come to a realtor like the two of you and say, hey, I want to sell mom's house. She passed away. I'm the executor. And they actually never got appointed as the executor. They're listed in the will. They're holding the original will and it says they're the executor, but they were able to clear everything out. They were able to get mom's bank account, or they were a beneficiary on life insurance. So they just assumed that meant they could sell the property. So they've done it with you, you've marketed it, you get to the closing table, and they start preparing the paperwork, and they're like, 1 second, you can't actually sign the sale, and you didn't have the legal right to do this. And they're like, but here, looks my will. It says, mom's will says I'm the executor, but that's a nomination. And a lot of people don't understand that. But when we write a will and we say, we want you to be our personal representative, our executor, that's me saying, I'd like for the court to appoint you, Katie, to be my executor. It's not you being my executor. And so in order to, particularly for you all with real estate, in order to sell that property, they have to go through that process of being appointed by the court and obtaining that letter testamentary or those letters of administration. Or when you get to the closing, you're kind of held up for a minute getting it done.
And that's not a quick process necessarily either.
No.
I've been in a situation where that has happened, and it's taken sometimes. Yeah.
I've only had very few situations, knock on wood. Over the years, I've had some weird scenarios where people thought they had a divorce, they thought they refinanced and removed somebody from the title, and unfortunately they didn't. One time in that situation, we found out, like a couple days before closing, and that other person happened to be in the woods of upstate New York, and they had to literally track him down. So it delayed things, I think, at least 2 weeks, and it was awful. But that's never a surprise you want to have. So typically we don't run into that as much anymore. We work with such great, lenders and attorneys, and so you still never know. I mean, it can happen. But these things people don't think about, and they don't research prior.
Well, and to the question that you asked earlier, Jonathan, we recently had a case where we had a tenant in common deed. And so mom died, dad died 3 years later. They never knew because they never looked at it, and dad just kept living in the house, which had been paid for 20 plus years already. They'd been in it almost 50 years over in Decatur. So mom passes away 3 years ago, dad dies in December, and son comes to say, let's deal with dad's estate. Well, mom and dad had an and deed, and mom's estate was never opened 3 years ago. So in order to get the title cleared, we have to go back and open mom's estate from 3 years ago and get them appointed. Well, dad had changed his will in the 3 years that she had been gone due to some family dynamics. And so now we had half of the interest that wasn't taken care of, but they thought they had resolved with the new will because it was under mom's estate. And it's taken 8 months. I mean, it's taken a long, long time to go through the process on mom's, and we can't even get started on dad's quite yet. So it's
and that house is just sitting there, right? Nothing can be done with it.
It is, and thankfully there's a very sweet neighbor who's mowing the yard, right? Who wants to buy the house and is helping the family take care of it. So they're working it out, but to your point, the last thing you want is to be the representative of the buyer of a property like that, right? So they've packed up all their stuff and moved, and they're ready to take their new house, and they got a great offer on it because there's no inventory, so you sold it for them, and they've moved out and they're in a pod, and now their new house is months from being theirs. So that's not what you want.
8 months. Oh my gosh. I'm sure you have a million kind of nightmare stories like that, which is scary, but
ultimately they get fixed and they work out for the most part.
That's what you do.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry. And we went off on a tangent. I think you had another question for us. So.
So I was answering Jonathan's question. Oh, I did. So we went off on a tangent. You're right.
I know, we went off on a tangent. That happens.
So the 75%. So on our rental properties, we have out-of-state owners and investors as well that have land in South Carolina, North Carolina, homes in Florida. Do you kind of work with people who are here anywhere they want to refinance or take out a mortgage?
Yes. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think we are licensed in 43 of the 50 states.
Okay, pretty much.
I know, like, New York is a state that I cannot do. It's very difficult to do a transaction in New York unless you have brick and mortar there. But there's just a handful of states that I can't do loans, but the others I can and do. I just did one in Massachusetts. Katie's friend.
Your friend too.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, you've done them in Florida, South Carolina. I know a lot of people that you've worked with in other cities.
Yeah, California. I've done Many states. Yeah.
Okay, good. Do you all sell anywhere but Georgia?
No, so we're only licensed in Georgia, but we have an amazing referral network, literally
Okay.
all over the world now. And I've personally met a lot of these people in other countries. I've gone to some really cool conferences just in the last year, pre-COVID, of course, where
Yeah.
I met people from France, from Japan, from Mexico. I have people all over the world now, connections. And then, of course, in the United States, we have some really strong connections with people and especially the surrounding states, but all over. So we've made lots of referrals over the years, and we really do the work on the referral. We're not just like, hey, call this guy. Like, we really get into the details so that we're connecting the right fit for each other and giving them options too. They don't just have to talk to one person. We can find a couple people if they'd like to have a couple options. So we love to refer people, and then those agents can refer to us because Atlanta's such a big relocation, city. People are moving here all the time from all over, and so vice versa. We're referring all the time. So
In the Savannah or Sea Island area, St. Simons, do you
Oh.
all serve people there as well? Yeah.
well, we know people. No, we don't actually physically go there ourselves, but we personally know. We like to go there to travel, but we personally know
Okay.
I know two excellent agents that are now in the newest Keller Williams office there in St. Simons, and they also, I know a lot of people in the Savannah area too, and so does Robby. So we have a lot of great connections there. We'd love to connect you.
Good.
So.
Should have coffee.
And coastal, yes, we'd love to have coffee.
Yeah.
From 6 feet away.
If that's what we need, yes.
If we have to, no, we can get closer. Cool. All right, I was just going to check the Facebook. We're still here live on Facebook. If everyone wants to look at their page, and may have see different things than I do. But if anybody sees any questions there, or anybody has any questions on Facebook, let us know. You can type them in. And if anybody else on the panel has any other questions for each other, let me know, or anything else you want to share.
Well, I would like to know what's helpful to you when we have an estate property. I'm assuming that you have other estate planning attorneys who they have an estate and somebody wants to sell a home. They're potentially the children are out of state and they want help with it here. Like, what's the easiest way to refer that business? How do you like to do it? And specifically when it's an estate-owned home and we have these sort of intricacies, is there something unique you need to know or special help you need for those? What makes that easy?
No, that's a great question. I've had a little bit of experience with that. I unfortunately don't get a ton of those referrals, but I would love more, and it's just another avenue for us. So the one I'm thinking of specifically that I had a couple years ago, and maybe this is weird to say, but it was, would you still consider it a estate if everybody was living? There were like 6 owners of one property, but they were all still alive and well, and they were just selling one of their properties. But I had to deal with all of those people. It was a lot. I had to literally get 6 signatures. I think it was 6, it might have been 7 on one contract. It was wild. And it all worked out. It was a very close family, but I don't know if that's a common situation or if you deal with, sometimes the states are a lot of people involved is what
right.
And
that's hard, but yes, you basically got an inherited already house, right? So somebody in that line passed away and they had 6 kids or they had 6 beneficiaries, and you don't always have agreement on whether or not a property should be sold. You have people who are emotionally attached to it. You might even have a family member living in the home at the time when a parent dies, somebody who was a caregiver. And so ultimately, rather than leave the estate open, they'll do a deed of assent and pass it to all the owners in kind as the property, which is what you have. Then you have a deed that has 6, 16, who knows how many owners.
A lot of people,
And so you're trying to coordinate them later with the sale. So that can be complicated. But oftentimes when you do have an older property, particularly something historical, and here in Georgia we have timberland properties, middle Georgia, we've got family farms, we've got a number of things where they're not quite ready to let it go. And as generations keep passing, the number of owners becomes quite substantial and a bit cumbersome for you.
Yeah.
So I would guess that having clear title and clear information about that and who everybody is probably pretty important to you guys.
So that's what I was going to say. Any referral from you, I would know it was coming from a place of organization at least, right? So we would love any referrals, and we would just want to know, all the details up front from you, if whether you're the person, the power of attorney or not, whoever that is, the point person. so that I could be in community. If I'm the listing agent, I'm going to be the one contacting that point person if it's not you, and explaining basically how I work and going through the paperwork, and of course going to see the home and giving the CMA, all the details that we would do with just somebody who called me from a townhome down the street, wants to sell their house. It would be the same process. It would just be potentially maybe more involved with your end of it, with paperwork, and say there are 6 people, that need to be paid out from this home. We just want to know all the details up front and know who ideally a point person is, because that situation I'm talking about, I did end up having to speak with multiple family members at one point. It was very difficult, so I kind of had to reel it in and just kind of talk to one, at one point, because somebody has to be the decision maker, at least be the communicator to the agent. I don't think it's wise to speak to 6 different people if you don't have to, because you're going to get 6 different stories,
Yeah.
So I think coming from you or from an attorney, we would probably have it already up front. The organization would be there and that what you're sharing. And then we would just work it just like we do a traditional sale, unless we had to do something special. And of course, if there were any privacy issues or anything, we're used to dealing with that too. We don't have to disclose anything that doesn't need to be legally disclosed. And a lot of times homes have been abandoned or vacant or whatever. The family may not have any idea the history of the home. And so traditionally, if you live in your home and you go to sell it, we ask you to fill out what's called a seller's disclosure to talk about the history of the home and any problems you've had, or you've replaced the roof or whatever. But you can sell homes in Georgia without that disclosure, so they can just be as is and nobody has any knowledge of what's gone on there. But then they have the option to have a home inspection and find out for themselves. So we've definitely dealt with properties like that a lot, and Robby is definitely working with buyers a lot, where he's looking at these homes that don't have seller's disclosure. So if whoever is going to buy this listing is going to be made aware, they're going to be made aware there's no disclosure. It's on you. Have your home inspection and kind of figure out, do your due diligence, make sure you want to buy this house. So, yeah. Oh, you're muted, Jonathan.
Yep, sorry. I have a question for you, because
I just want to make sure, did that answer your question, Amy? Or
yeah, that's great.
So my question is along the same lines as what you were just talking about, Katie. So I was aware that you could sell a house that was your house that you're living in and not sign a seller's disclosure. So let's just say that that there's issues with the house. Just say that you've got water intrusion, or you've got, I don't know, any number of things that you are aware of. You can sell your house, knowingly not disclose those issues, and just sell it as is. And
I mean, you can, I guess, technically, but as a listing agent, if we're made aware of any of that, like we I think ethically and probably legally have to disclose something like that if we knew there was a massive leak or something. But as a homeowner, from what I understand, they can and will disclose what they either know or they're comfortable. We would encourage them to fill out a seller's disclosure, but they don't. But my experience, and probably Robby's too, is a majority of people that don't fill out disclosures really don't have any. They're either investors, they never lived in the home. It was somebody else's home. They passed away. Like, they have no real knowledge, or if they have a clue, they can't speak to having that experience because they didn't live in the home. But I would say if it was your home and you knew there was a massive problem and you weren't disclosing it, to me, you're opening yourself up for a big lawsuit, because, people will find out and they'll be like, why didn't he tell me he's lived in this house for 20 years? Like, they're going to know your story to some extent. They're going to know you're not an investor who just flipped this house. You know what I mean? They can see that you actually live there. You live there now. Like, how could you be aware of this massive problem?
Well, it's not necessarily that you're not aware of it. You're just not disclosing it.
Well, there's a difference though between disclosing and fixing or paying for, honestly, right? So we can always come into it saying, look, there is this problem, but too bad, like, take it. Like, I don't care. Like, there's that attitude, which is totally fine, even though it's not ideal. At least it's there, but you don't have to do anything about it if you don't want to. And then it's going to be reflected in the price one way or another.
Of course, yeah.
You can't ask $500 and it's a $20,000 problem. You know what I mean? You're not going to get $500. So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. Does that answer? Or were you going to say something, Robby, about that?
I think I was just going to say that, and I mean, yeah, you run into that a lot when it's investor properties, but if it's somebody, it's like an owner occupant. I mean, I think if they're not offering a disclosure and it's being marketed as is, that sometimes, you know, if it's owner occupied, sometimes I might put a stipulation in the contract saying, you know, just kind of detailing that there's no disclosure offered, and just something that's in writing that says everybody understands the situation.
Yeah.
You know.
You kind of like know what you're getting in, you know, as a buyer, you're going to,
yeah, exactly.
you're going to know what you're getting into. As a seller, again, if you have whatever your problems are, attitude wise or otherwise, you know, we can't control that, but you know, majority of
probably
people,
not ideal, but it happens.
Yeah,
I mean,
it happens.
In a situation where I sold my parents' house and my mom has dementia, so we couldn't really do a seller's disclosure.
That's, yeah, and that's to me very,
and so it was like, you know, here's the disclosure. We don't have one because we don't have the detail on the property or whatever. And, you know, as long as you carefully work through those issues with your buyer, you know, there shouldn't be any problem, but.
Yeah. Were you thinking of a specific instance, or you were just curious, Jonathan? I didn't know.
No, I was more curious. I was just kind of thinking along the lines of, you know, somebody that had a house and they knew there was a lot of work that needed to be done, and they don't want to highlight that. Okay, they know that someone's going to come in, especially if it's being sold as is. Someone's going to come in and do their due diligence and do a home inspection, right? 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, the inspector's going to find the big ticket items, right? So my question would be, if that's the case, really, what would be the benefit of them of doing a seller's disclosure as opposed to just not selling it as is, I guess?
But they can do both is the thing. It's just, I think it's more just an ethical or honesty thing of disclosing, literally, or a technical legal thing. And then again, it can be as is all day. Like they can say, look, it needs a new roof. Like the water's coming in as we speak, but I'm not going to fix it, you know, and that's why.
So you're saying do a seller's disclosure and sell it as is?
You can, yeah, you can do that for sure. And that's probably a better scenario. At least people are being upfront, you know, but like in Robby's example, absolutely not. There's no reason, you know, that's a different story. That's a legitimate situation.
Right, right. So I have one more question on this, just because this is all new to me. So let's just say that you do sell a house as is, right? And let's just say that you've got water intrusion coming into the basement or something along those lines, okay? It's a big ticket item to fix and you know it. So you sell the house as is, somebody comes in, they put it on the house, they do a home inspection. Let's just say their inspector doesn't pick up on it. It hasn't rained in a month and they just miss it for whatever reason, okay? Closes, a month later, there's a big rain and water's coming in through the basement, and it's obviously been a problem for a long time. What is the seller's liability at that point? Because they sold it as is and what they were supposed to do, and the homeowner did what they were supposed to do by getting a home inspector. So fall into the home inspector's error and omissions, or how would that play out?
I mean, yeah, that's it, because it's over and done. I mean, they bought it, the buyer bought it, the seller sold it. The buyer could definitely go after the home inspector. Unfortunately, I have seen that more than once in different situations. But the home inspector has their own insurance and policy as well. So that's one way they could do it. And then again, it's just all comes down to money, right? It's like, does the buyer want to sue the seller? I mean, it would just be a big, hairy legal mess. Like it's not.
Amy, what is that term? It's caveat emptor or whatever. It's buyer beware.
Buyer beware.
Buyer beware, yeah.
Yeah.
Get a good agent.
Yeah, get a good agent. Get a good inspector. You know.
Yeah. And I think that to the extent the buyer hasn't done something to conceal the issue, right? You knew it happened. You cleaned it up. You repainted the wall. You put something in front of the place where the leak is. Yeah. And so you tried to go beyond that. I didn't just disclose it, but I actually did something to conceal it from the inspector or someone else. I think those are the kinds of things where you might find somebody comes back in and has an issue, and then they're feeling a little bit principled about it. Yeah. And that seems to trump cost of litigation and those things sometimes because
Yeah.
they're feeling like it was there. So I think it's one thing to not disclose. I don't know, as a non-lawyer, but as a multiple home purchaser in my life, I would look at a property that had a no disclosure and an as is, and I'd get a good inspection and I'd go to the inspection.
Thorough.
I'd go hang out with that guy while he walked around and say,
Yeah.
what about that over there? What about that over there? And take a look at it. And truly, if it was a tear down, right? If this was something I was going to gut and
Yeah.
redo anyway, which I like to do. So if that was
Doesn't
something I was going to do, then
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm going to.
And a lot of those properties that people are going to truly gut and
Yeah.
renovate, they sometimes just don't even get an inspection because
They don't
once you
even- they're just
Right.
like
put
it's
the whole
mess.
thing out. So
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, but that's a good question. And it can come up and you just,
Yeah.
you know, that's what they say, like get a good agent and get a good inspector and feel, and you know, again, like you said, principal, but also people just get like feelings and vibes and look around and notice things and ask questions. And that's why we literally have this due diligence period, which is traditionally around 10 days. You know, they can have anybody under the sun come through that house and check it out for them. But after that, you know, if they still feel good about moving forward, it is what it is. And if you have owned a home before, and if you haven't, it sometimes comes as a big surprise, you know, you will have problems. They will come up and they may be the day after you close and they may be 10 years after you close, but it's not necessarily the seller's doing, you know? So that's another thing is that we have to explain what home ownership is about and the surprises that can come up, you know,
Right.
as you know very well too, Jonathan. I mean, you've owned homes and you've had problems and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've also had people, you know, clients of mine ask me, well, if I'm getting an appraisal, why do I need a home inspection? And I say, they're not even.
Get a new agent.
Yeah, but people don't understand. First-time home buyers don't. They just think that an appraiser is going to go out there and and check everything to make sure that it's, you know, that it's working.
Yeah.
They don't understand that that's not their job. You know.
Yeah. That's a big, So we do a great buyer consultation. Robby does an excellent buyer consultation where he goes over all these things. And Jonathan does a great consultation as well to explain what is an appraisal and why are you paying for it. It literally has nothing to do with a home inspection, you know. So we do make this very clear to people when they work with us, you know, because these are basic and major things they need to know in the transaction. So this is good. This is good stuff. So cool. So we're just a few minutes from 6:30. So I was just going to glance at my Facebook and see, I don't see any questions, but I see a few people watching. So hi out there to people watching. If you have any questions, type them in the comment box and let us know. I don't know if you guys have any questions in your watch parties, but you can check it and let us know. One thing I was going to mention just the last few minutes here is that we've been doing these meetings now, I think 12 or 13 weeks. I'm losing count quickly. And so Robby and I have decided we're going to wrap up this series that we've done. This Atlanta real estate kind of started with the COVID-19, you know, pandemic and been just kind of following it through, which is still happening, but obviously there's been a lot of changes in movement in this whole time. So we've been doing them weekly on Wednesday from 5:30 to 6:30. We're going to do it a few more weeks. So July 1st will be the last Wednesday night call that we do, but we're going to revamp and do something new in August. So we'll keep you posted on that. So I just thought I'd mention you have a couple more weeks to tune into this with us. I think it's been really helpful and we've had some great guests. So I appreciate everybody and we'll continue to be available, of course, for any questions anytime. But this whole Zoom life and doing these weekly calls has been really fun, I think, and helpful to a lot of people. So I appreciate you guys for that. So anyway, any last comments y'all want to make or questions? We have a few minutes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you for thank you for coming, Amy, and joining us because I really appreciate your perspective and what you do. I think it's crucial, and especially, you know, again, we didn't talk a lot about the COVID-19 pandemic, but I know during this time, I'm sure it's affected your business as well, and you've had to deal with new challenges as well, just as we all have. But you're still here and you're pivoting. And as you told me, you've been going to the office since day one. Nothing's changed. You're the only person there, but that's okay. And so that, you know, these are the kind of vendors and people we like to work with that we haven't stopped. You know, we're not going to stop.
No.
We're here to help you guys. And these are all essential things that we do in life. So